Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, the NFL season continues with OTAs. Rookie mini camps are in the book. Most teams will have their mini camps next week and then take a hiatus to the summer when training camps kick off late July, early August. But here at Saturday to Sunday, we continue to dissect every single angle from the 2023 NFL draft, from a real life NFL perspective, from a fantasy/dynasty perspective. Over the last couple episodes, I shared my Dynasty Rookie Ranking tiers. I shared my IDP rookie rankings and also blended it together with my offensive players to kind of talk through what my rookie big board would look like for blended offense and defense. And what I'm going to do tonight is an activity I did a couple years ago, did not get a chance to do it last year, is blend together the 2022 rookie class as they now enter their sophomore seasons in the NFL with the 2023 rookie class. So things that you can use these rankings for. If you still have your rookie drafts, I know rookie drafts start up right after the NFL draft, but some people, they continue through the entire summer until August at different times. Otherwise, you can use these rankings for just discussing trades. I'm going to have an episode where I go through my updated positional overall dynasty rankings by position, and you'll see where these youngsters fit in there. But tonight's just ranking the 2022 class, now entering their second NFL season, versus the 2023 class. Because I do sometimes think that people overvalue the new class, and it provides some potential value from the previous class, and people who were really high on last year, sometimes people sour on them very quickly, and they could be had for, a clear round or less rookie draft pick compared to where they, teams invested those players just a year ago. So if you're watching on YouTube, I have the screen share up, sharing my rankings. These are in the S2S Premium Rankings notebook, but I'm going to talk through them here tonight, explaining my thought process and sharing the ranks as well. So let's jump right into it at the quarterback position. Obviously, this was a unique situation because last year we didn't have a strong quarterback class. We didn't have anything near the top of the draft. Kenny Pickett was the only round one quarterback last year before we had that trio in the third round. But going into right now, I would still clearly rank Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud as 1, 2, 3. But then I would slide in at number 4, Kenny Pickett at number 4, Brock Purdy at number 5, Desmond Ridder at number 6. Before then, I bounced back to the current class, which would have Will Levis at 7, Hendon Hooker at 8, and then Sam Howell at 9. So, no real discussion needed at the top. I was not a big Kenny Pickett fan. I thought his first year was average, but he was a first-round pick. He's going to have a couple years to prove himself. Pittsburgh has a good supporting cast there with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Najee Harris. They upgraded the offensive line a little bit, so he's set up there. So for me, picking Pickett after that first 3 was very easy. It was Richardson, it was Young, it was Stroud. And then I think Pickett, because he's locked in, and I think Pittsburgh will give him a couple years. So we're talking about a guy who probably, would be a QB2 in Superflex or 2 quarterback league. So Pickett would be that. The uncertainty with the San Francisco situation, is it Brock Purdy's? Is Trey Lance out? Like, if I knew Brock Purdy was going to be the opening day starter for the 49ers, that setup, that scheme, that offense, I think I'd actually even have Purdy ahead of Kenny Pickett on this, because I think Kenny Pickett is who he is. I mean, obviously Brock Purdy surprised us all, but I believe in that Shanahan scheme. I believe in how they put their playmakers in positions to be successful. I love the trio of, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and then you got Christian McCaffrey. I think whoever the quarterback of the 49ers is, they are set up to have some fantasy viability. So if I knew Purdy was going to be the guy this year, he'd be ahead of Kenny Pickett. Desmond Ridder is next for me. I don't think he's going to be asked to pass a lot, but they have surrounded him with a potential elite supporting cast, a great O-line play. So I think if you combine his rushing capabilities with the offensive weapons he has, I like the setup there. That's why I have him ahead of Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. Will Levis won the second round. I expect him to get the reins from Ryan Tannehill sooner rather than later. But at the same time, I had some questions about his ability to translate at the next level. He doesn't have the setup of a Brock Purdy. He doesn't have the draft capital and the weapons of Kenny Pickett. And he doesn't have the setup either of Desmond Ridder, who I think is going to get every opportunity for at least this year, if not, and if he's successful, maybe even 2 years. So I went with the 3 guys from the 2022 class and Pickett, Purdy, and Ridder before Will Levis because we don't know when he's going to get the job. We don't know the transition. They don't have a lot of offensive playmakers there who are proven. Young guys, a couple of them who I like a lot, and I'll talk about a couple of them tonight. But that's where I go with Levis 7, Hendon Hooker 8, and then Sam Howell 9. I'm not as a big a believer in Sam Howell. I know he's getting the starting gig, and Hooker, you're going to have to wait a little bit. But I also just love the setup there in Detroit that if for some reason Jared Goff isn't the quarterback a year from now and it's Hendon Hooker, I would feel much higher on him than I would Sam Howell. So I know if you needed a guy right now, sure, Sam Howell would be the guy who's going to get an opportunity to start, where I don't think Hendon Hooker sees the field this year. So I get that perspective. But if we're thinking long term, if we're thinking dynasty, I think Hendon Hooker's ceiling is higher than Sam Howell. So that's why I would have Hendon Hooker there and Sam Howell rounding it out. I only went 9 deep because I think all the other guys are just kind of stashes. The odds of them getting a real shot, I think, are pretty low. Malik Willis, Matt Corral, Jaron Hall, Jake Hayner. I mean, those guys would just kind of all, round out, let's say, the top 15. Those guys who were the rest of the third round picks last year, and then the guys who were the fourth round picks this year would make up like that next 5 or 6 names if we stretch this out to 15. So I kind of wanted to stop there at 9. You have the big 3 from this year, then Pickett, Purdy, Ridder, then Levis, Hooker, and Howell, and a little bit my reasoning there. I think Levis' natural talent, I think I like his natural talent more than Kenny Pickett, Purdy, or Ridder, but there are still question marks. He fell to the second round. The good is good. The bad is bad. I've said it before. Carson Wentz, Jay Cutler is who he reminds me of. Those other guys, though, Pickett's a little bit more stable, and he's going to get, I think, a good few more years in Pittsburgh. Purdy and Ridder are set up in really pristine situations for different reasons. Like Purdy, it's more of the play calling, Kyle Shanahan, with good playmakers for sure who do things after the catch that won't ask Purdy to do a lot in terms of pushing the ball vertically down the field. And then Ridder, between Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and I think Arthur Smith is a good play caller. He could be set up there also in a very friendly scheme. The question mark is obviously volume and stuff like that. But, that could be a question mark for Purdy as well. It could be a question mark for Will Levis if he was to take over and Derrick Henry is still there. So there's question marks on all of them. So I went with the guys who I think will be starting this year and Pickett, Purdy, and Ridder before Will Levis, who might have to wait a little bit, doesn't have a great supporting cast around him right now. So that's kind of how I rank those 4. But I think those would be the 4. If people want to mix and match, I could see people ranking Pickett, Purdy, Ridder, Levis in a variety of ways. And then I do think Howell and Hooker should be the last 2 in this top 9. And I think those could be interchanged. But I went with the guy who I had a higher grade on coming out of college. I liked him more as a player. And I think he's in a better situation there in that what they're building there with the Lions. I think he's set up to be a little bit more successful. He can have a little bit more touchdown rushing capabilities. I think Sam Howell's got good athleticism too to be a little bit of a weapon in the run game as well. But I could see Hendon Hooker, if his injury and his knee hold up, he could be a guy who's a dangerous, red zone runner, goal line runner, in a way almost like Dante Culpepper was once upon a time. So that's how I kind of went with Hooker there over Howell. If we take this over to the running backs and combining the 2022 and 2023 rookie classes, I think the top is obviously easy. It's Bijan Robinson. And then I think it's a little bit interesting because you got Breece Hall coming back off of injury, but he had a great year. And then I went him 2. And then I would have had Kenneth Walker 3rd if it wasn't for the Zach Charbonnet selection by Seattle. But I think that opens up enough curiosity in terms of how that situation plays itself out, that I would rank Jahmyr Gibbs ahead of Kenneth Walker if I was doing these rankings blended together. So my top four there is clearly Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, 2 from the 2022 class, 2 from the 2023 class. After that, I chose to go with 3 guys from the 2022 class over the 2023 class. I think their roles are a little bit more certain and stabilized. And I think their talent and upside is on the same level of the 3 guys from the 2023 class. So for me, I have Rachaad White 5, Dameon Pierce 6, James Cook 7, and then I have Devin Achane, Kendre Miller, Zach Charbonnet, the 3 from this year. So here's my thought process a little bit. I like a guy like Rachaad White. I think he's got a 3-down skill set. I still think his bread and butter is the passing game. I think that's where he's still going to make his best self in terms of the NFL, in terms of the value he brings, is as a really prolific pass catcher. But right now, he's also set up to get a pretty heavy workload in terms of the run game as well. So for me, he's 5. Dameon Pierce 6. Dameon Pierce, Zach Charbonnet, don't think there's a lot of difference between them. I thought their talent was pretty comparable in terms of their skill sets. I didn't think Zach Charbonnet was a second-round pick. I thought he was more of a mid to late third-round pick. I thought that's where Dameon Pierce deserved to go. Dameon Pierce has Ali as the lead guy in Houston, and I think Houston will start to turn things around this year. They have a really good offensive line. If CJ Stroud could give them good quarterback play, I think you could see a lot more touchdown equity potentially for Dameon Pierce. So for me, having Dameon Pierce ahead of Zach Charbonnet was an easy call. I think, there's a lot of uncertainty with Charbonnet. He has the draft capital. Some people loved him as a prospect. I didn't love. But I just, with Kenneth Walker there, I don't see an opportunity for him to carry nearly as heavy a workload as Dameon Pierce might have. And then James Cook, right now, unless Buffalo gets Dalvin Cook, his brother, which would be fascinating. But, I think right now it's open for him to be one of the lead guys in that backfield. I do think Damian Harris is going to have a pretty good year, but I think James Cook, I have Devin Achane right behind him. I think James Cook and Devin Achane could get equitable rushing potential, provided Dalvin Cook is in neither of those locations. But I think James Cook has potential to be a great receiving back. I think Devin Achane could probably be a good receiving back. But I think I thought James Cook was the best receiving back in the class last year, him and Rachaad White, and they're both on this list. I just think the roles of Rachaad White, Dameon Pierce, and James Cook are a little bit more solidified than Devin Achane, Kendre Miller, and Zach Charbonnet. If Charbonnet ended up going somewhere that wasn't where Kenneth Walker was, he'd be much higher on this list. Devin Achane, his body type probably screams out, just like James Cook, that he's probably never going to be a true bell cow. But right now, I'd prefer the pass catching upside of James Cook than I would the explosive playmaking ability of Devin Achane. I think James Cook has some explosiveness to him as well. I just think James Cook I think he's got a better chance of being more of a weapon in the pass game than Devin Achane is. And then Kendre Miller is a little bit uncertainty right there. We don't know how long Alvin Kamara is going to be suspended. We don't know if it's his last year in New Orleans. We don't know how much they want to use Kendre Miller this year. Do they want to use Jamal Williams a lot? So I have Kendre Miller still ahead of Zach Charbonnet because I think the path to maybe being the lead guy there is easier for him than it is for Charbonnet. But I think the 3 from last year, Rachaad White, Pierce, and Cook, are just in better situations right now to feel safe about. I don't think the talent for any of these is all that different. So right now I'm going by opportunity, and I think the opportunity for White, Pierce, and Cook is greater than Achane, Kendre Miller, and Zach Charbonnet. So if I'm in a rookie draft right now and the pick seems to be Devin Achane, Kendre Miller, or Zach Charbonnet, I'm going to touch base with the owners of Rachaad White, Dameon Pierce, and James Cook and make sure that I can't make that swap. Let's say I'm sitting there and it's the 10th pick of a rookie draft and I'm thinking about, Charbonnet or Achane or Miller. For me, they'd be a little bit further down the ranks. So maybe in that 12 to 14 range, I'm looking at those guys. And, if I'm on the clock, I might shoot an offer to the guy who has James Cook, the guy who has Dameon Pierce, the guy who has Rachaad White, because I think I'd rather those guys slightly than Achane, Kendre Miller, and Zach Charbonnet. Right after that, it's another group that I think is very close hit here. I have the 7th rounder from last year, Isaiah Pacheco, who took over the lead reins of that Kansas City backfield, but he was a 7th round pick. We know KC likes to mix and match their running backs. Jared McKinnon has had a huge role every year. I just don't feel as certain that the Chiefs aren't going to make an investment at the running back position, whether it's a trade during the year, whether it's another earlier draft pick next year or a free agent. So for me, I have him there. I think I'd rather A-Chain, Kendra Miller, or Zach Charbonnet buying the talent of those guys and the draft capital over Pacheco. But at the same time, I would put Pacheco before I'd go to the next wave of the 2023 running backs, which is Roshan Johnson, Tyjae Spears, Tank Bigsby. All of those guys are intriguing to me. They're either a third or fourth round draft capital. Roshan Johnson could develop into the starter there for Chicago. Tank Bigsby could become a 50-50 type, work share there with Travis Etienne. Tyjae Spears kind of has to wait his turn a little bit there, but if they move on from Tennessee, he can be a major impact player in both the run game and the pass game. So I had Pacheco there at 11, followed by Roshan Johnson 12, Tyjae Spears 13, Tank Bigsby 14. I do have all of those guys from this year's draft class, Roshan Johnson, Tyjae Spears, and Tank Bigsby, ahead of last year's third-round pick, Brian Robinson, who went to the Commanders. The reason for that is I like the talent better of Johnson, Spears, and Bigsby, in terms of my film eval over Brian Robinson. I also think the situation for Brian Robinson is all not that different. I just laid out in Chicago. They signed Donta Foreman to a one-year deal. They have Khalil Herbert there. Derrick Henry still in Tennessee, but I see the path opening there. And Tank Bigsby's got a great young running back ahead of him in Travis Etienne. But Brian Robinson is kind of in this weird timeshare. They have Antonio Gibson, who kind of worked his way out of the doghouse at the latter part of last year, who's going to be involved in the pass game a lot. They are talking up Chris Rodriguez a lot, who is a sixth-round pick this year, but new offensive coordinator Ed Bieniemy really wanted him. So I think Brian Robinson's kind of in the mix there of potentially a 2 or 3-way committee. So for me, I'd much rather gamble on the upside of Roshan Johnson, Tyjae Spears, or Tank Bigsby over Brian Robinson. I do think Brian Robinson in half PPR might have a little bit more value. I have question marks about Sam Howell. So for me, he'd be 15th on this list. After that, then I went with Chase Brown and Eric Gray from this year's running back class. Obviously, we know the story on both those guys. I've talked about them a lot. Joe Mixon's long-term status in Cincinnati, unknown. Saquon Barkley's short-term and long-term, ability in terms of availability for the Giants is in question, right? We don't know that. So that's why I have Brown and Gray where I have them. Then I have Zach Evans and Dwayne McBride. I think Zach Evans is still, I don't think the Rams are all that in on Cam Akers. So could a guy like Zach Evans as a 6th-round pick get an opportunity? Dwayne McBride, obviously today, the Minnesota Vikings officially announced that they are going to release Dalvin Cook. Maybe they haven't made it a formality yet because they're still trying to trade him. But if they can't, he's just going to be flat out cut. Can Dwayne McBride jump over a guy like Ty Chandler, who's a little bit further down this list? We'll see. I like Dwayne McBride's talent. I like Ty Chandler last year, but I do think McBride could be an interesting guy there. It's amazing at 20, a guy who rushed for 1,000 yards in his rookie season is down there, Tyler Algier. But listen, he's got 3 years left on his rookie contract, and he's going to be playing behind Bijan Robinson. I know Atlanta likes to run the ball, but they didn't just invest in Bijan Robinson as the 8th pick in the draft to have another guy getting 8 to 10 carries a game. So I just don't see with Tyler Algier, and he's not going to be using the pass game. So, just like when the Giants drafted Saquon Barkley, they were going to feed him. They're going to do the same thing with Bijan Robinson. So while Tyler Algier, based on his rookie year, should be at least 5 or 6 spots ahead of this, I just have a lot of question marks on whether or not he's really going to get an opportunity, without an injury to Bijan to have any fantasy viability. I see a path where Dwayne McBride could, supersede, Alexander Madison either during this year or next year. I see a path for Zach Evans to do that to Cam Akers. We see an uncertain situation with Joe Mixon and Saquon Barkley. What's the story for Tyler Algier? Unless it's a Bijan injury, I just don't see any real path in the next couple of years for him to be fantasy viable without an injury. I have Zamir White at 21st. We'll see if Josh Jacobs is there long-term. I think last year Zamir White had a lot more buzz because it didn't seem like Josh Jacobs would be back. They had declined his 5th-year option. So I think that's an interesting scenario. And then Chris Rodriguez, I talked about him before. I have him at 22, Pierre Strong Jr. at 23, Israel Abanikanda at 24. Then I have Ty Chandler and Jerome Ford. I think both of those are interesting guys. Right now, Jerome Ford is slated to be the backup to Nick Chubb. Obviously, if Chubb was to go down, Ford would be an interesting player. And then Ty Chandler, I don't think he's in the mix to be a significant part of that Minnesota backfield. I think they want to give Alexander Mattison a real shot here, and they think he can be the guy. And then we'll see about McBride and Chandler after him. But he's sitting there at 25 as well. A little bit of an interesting stash. I wouldn't mind getting him on some dynasty teams. The price should be cheap. The price probably will be cheaper than Dwayne McBride, who's a little bit more, a guy that people liked in the pre-draft process. So I would recommend trying to, take your 4th or 5th round rookie pick and see if you can turn it into Ty Chandler. I think that would be, good value. If we take this over to the wide receivers, at the top is a 5 guys from last year's class before we mix in Jackson Smith-Njigba, and then a couple spots later, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers. So let me go through my top 10 a little bit, and maybe a little bit. I'll go for my top 12 because I feel like my top 12 is kind of needs to be explained together. I have Garrett Wilson at number 1, Chris Olave at number 2, Drake London at number 3, Treylon Burks at number 4, Jamison Williams at number 5, Jackson Smith-Njigba at number 6, Jahan Dotson at number 7, Jordan Addison at 8, Zay Flowers at 9, Christian Watson at 10, George Pickens at 11, and Quentin Johnston at 12. So we have mixed in there all of the first-round wide receivers from last year, all of the first-round wide receivers from this year, and then also 2 second-round picks last year in Christian Watson and George Pickens. So for me, based on the landing spot of Jackson Smith-Njigba, I went on record that just on film eval alone, Jackson Smith-Njigba, based on his ability to probably just be a slot only, was probably somewhere in that 3rd or 4th wide receiver on film compared to last year's guys. Then when he ends up in Seattle with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, for me, easily Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Drake London would be my 1, 2, 3. I always have been a fan of Treylon Burks. I still think he could be a very good player. We saw him win on the outside a lot last year and vertically down the field. I wasn't sure that was going to be something in the cards, especially in his rookie year. So I'm intrigued by his long-term outlook that he could be a legit number 1 outside wide receiver that you can move around, do all different things to. So I have him at 4. I was a huge Jamison Williams fan last year, pre-draft and even post-draft, even when I knew he was going to miss time. I love Jamison Williams. I think in that Lions offense, with the attention, Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to get, I think Jamison Williams could be a major impact player once he's fully, now he's got the suspension this year, but once he gets fully integrated in that offense, I think he can become an explosive playmaker, and it could be a 1A, 1B type, thing there between him and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if somebody wants to put Jackson Smith-Njigba ahead of Jamison Williams, I'm right there. I could totally understand that. I love Jackson Smith-Njigba. I've compared him to Cooper Kupp. If he ever becomes that type of volume wide receiver for Seattle, he probably belongs ahead of Jamison Williams. But right now, with DK and Tyler there, I went with the big playability of Jamison Williams over Jackson Smith-Njigba. For me, the next guys closely knit together, Jahan Dotson, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers. I love Jahan Dotson last year. On film coming out, I think I like Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers a tad more, like a real tad. But we've already seen Jahan Dotson at the NFL level be successful. He's a guy that has shown the ability to win at all 3 levels. I know Matt Harmon said he was very impressed with him in his reception perception. I look forward to getting Matt on the show and talking about some of these second-year wide receivers for sure. So I would have Jahan Dotson at 7. And then, Addison and Flowers. I went with Addison and Flowers ahead of Christian Watson and George Pickens because I do have some concerns on those guys. I think the Christian Watson hype is a little too much. I think he is not a complete wide receiver. I think he's a little feast or famine. If you told me he's going to be a better version of Marquez Valdes-Scantling, or he's going to be the best year we saw out of Martavius Bryant, I think that's more the path for a guy like Christian Watson. I think Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers are more guys who can win at all 3 levels of the field, be much more higher volume type wide receivers than a guy like Christian Watson. Even right now, there's been a lot of hype on Romeo Doubs. There's been hype on Jaden Reed. We don't know what the post Aaron Rodgers and then now the Jordan Love Green Bay offense is going to look like. So I think there's some question marks there with Christian Watson, and then even George Pickens. I like George Pickens a lot. I liked him coming out last year, but I think there's some question marks at, at his refinement and development, and how good he can be in terms of a complete player. So I still preferred Addison and Flowers ahead of Watson and Pickens. And then for me, I have my question marks on Quentin Johnston. So for me, I'll slide in Watson and Pickens at 10 and 11, and then Quentin Johnston after that. If I was up in a rookie draft and, the best guy on the board was Quentin Johnston, I'd probably touch base with the owners of, Jahan Dotson, Christian Watson, and George Pickens. If any of them valued Quentin Johnston more than Dotson, Watson, or Pickens, I'd pull the trigger. I'd give up Quentin Johnson and I'd take Jahan Dotson, Watson, or Pickens. Again, I think it's all a preference thing based on rankings that are out there. I don't think Christian Watson's would be plausible. Pickens and Dotson, you might be able to get in a trade for the pick that would become Quentin Johnston. After that, it's really heavy towards this year's wide receiver class. I have John Domingo at 13, Jaden Reed at 14, Josh Downs at 15, Jalen Hyde at 16, Rashee Rice at 17, Marvin Mims at 18, Tank Dell at 19. So I have all those day two wide receivers from this year before I bring into the mix Wan'Dale Robinson and Sky Moore. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson, I thought last year was a guy who was going too far in rookie drafts. I was scooping him up everywhere. I thought the Giants had big plans for him. That ACL injury really, to me, puts a little bit of a damper on this. Is he ready for the start of this year? The trade for Darren Waller, the drafting of Jalen Hyatt, the emergence of Isaiah Hodgins, the re-signing of Darius Slayton, all of a sudden from last year, a wide open depth chart, now a much more crowded pass catcher, a guy who's going to make his living in the slot, not a big play explosive threat, not a guy like Tank Dell, who I think can make some big explosive plays. Wan'Dale's going to be more a guy that moves the change, makes people misses, but I don't think we're looking at like 50-yard touchdowns from Wan'Dale. I think we're looking at like 15-yard catches, 12-yard catches, end around, jet sweeps. So I thought his path last year to being a really viable high-end fantasy player was high volume. 90 catches, 100 catches. To me, that's the only way Wan'Dale ever touches that wide receiver 2, like low wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 border, was on heavy volume. I'm just not sure that's there anymore. So for me, I think I pushed him down the board a little bit with the injury, the more crowded room in terms of possible options, and not a guy who's going to be a big touchdown guy. And I don't think he's a big play guy. I think he needs heavy volume. Not sure that's the path right now in his role for the Giants, especially come back from injury. And then Sky Moore. I pushed back last year, said he was way too high in the rankings. They went out and made another investment. They traded a third-round pick for Kadarius Toney because they still thought he was around one talent. They drafted a wide receiver in the second round. They moved up to get Rashee Rice. I think if they were really sold on Sky Moore, they would have been less inclined to do that. So for me right now, Wan'Dale and Sky Moore last year, round 2 guys, they get pushed down the board just a little to kind of see these new guys in action. And then we see how Wan'Dale comes back from his injury and integrates back into the Giants offense. And then what is the role for Sky Moore? Does KC envision a 3 wide receiver set of, Marquez Valdes-Scantling on one side, Rashee Rice, the bigger guy on the other side, and then maybe Kadarius Toney doing all different things? Is Sky Moore going to be number 4 in the wide receiver depth chart? And then also Travis Kelce. They run a ton of two tight end sets. So I think there's a lot more uncertainty. If somebody wants to have Sky Moore a little bit higher, ahead of Wan'Dale Robinson or ahead of Tank Dell or ahead of, Marvin Mims right there next to Rashee Rice, I can totally get that. I think those guys are very interchangeable. And even number 22, Cedric Tillman, he's right there too. We'll see if Cleveland is to get, DeAndre Hopkins. I think that really hurts Cedric Tillman. I think it hurts Elijah Moore's dynasty value. So we'll see there. And then 23, I have John Mechie. And Mechie's a little bit of a wild card, right? We don't know him coming back from his illness last year. Is his rookie year. So like, where does he kind of fit in this pecking order? I kind of put him right there. If somebody wanted to have him a little bit higher, they could. Houston did just go out and get Tank Dell, so they have a couple young wide receivers. They have Nico Collins. I still think they're very much will be in the market for an alpha number 1 wide receiver next offseason or via trade. So, he kind of gets put in there just to kind of see him coming back from this, illness and just to see how he plays and how he responds and what the role for him is there. But I really do think after from 15 where I have Josh Downs to 23 where I have John Mechie, I think I really like Jaden Reed. He's got the draft capital, the free level versatility. For me, from 15 to 23, and I'll read it again: Downs, Hyatt, Rashee Rice, Marvin Mims, Tank Dell, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sky Moore, Cedric Tillman, and John Mechie. They are very interchangeable. You can mix that up and put that in any order you want and make a strong case for it. So I think those guys are very comparable. At 24, I have Romeo Doubs. Some people probably have him ahead of this. I know he had some moments last year. I still have my doubts. I think Jaden Reed's going to eventually work his way into being on the field on 2 down wide receiver sets, and then Romeo Doubs will be off the field and only come on the field when it's 3 wide. I like Romeo Doubs, the player. I liked him last year. I think now the hype might be a little bit too high for him. So I have him there at 24, Alec Pierce at 25, and then Tyquan Thornton. I'm interested in Tyquan Thornton. He's a guy that I would love to get on all my dynasty teams. I don't think he'll cost a lot. I think you could probably snag him for, a mid to late 3rd round rookie pick. And I've been on record in offensive only drafts. To me, there's a huge cliff after pick 28. To me, there's 28 or 29 rookies, depending on if you count Hendon Hooker or not, depending on your settings. But after that, it falls off. So to me, middle of 3rd round, I would gladly trade my 3rd round rookie pick that I might invest on Michael Wilson or Chase Brown or Eric Gray, or Luke Schoonmaker. I would without a doubt trade that pick for Tyquan Thornton, who was a 2nd round pick last year and wide open depth chart there in New England in terms of pass catchers. He could definitely develop there this year. So he'd be a guy that I'd be screaming to buy. Then I have the Michael Wilson, Charlie Jones, Tyler Scott trio from this year. Obviously, Michael Wilson, late 3rd round pick. Charlie Jones and Tyler Scott are more for the future. Does Tyler Boyd leave Cincinnati? Does Darnell Mooney? I think that's what their upside rests in there, 28 and 29. And then I round out with Khalil Shakir, who's in Buffalo. We'll see if he gets an opportunity to integrate himself to be their slot wide receiver and their 3rd option there. I think it's going to be more Dalton Kincaid after Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of fantasy viability for Khalil Shakir. We'll see about Kyle Phillips. He looked good last year before an injury. Can he develop into a prolific slot wide receiver for Tennessee? I don't think the talent is what I think of Wan'Dale Robinson, but if Kyle Phillips was to become fantasy viable, it'd be in the same way I think Wan'Dale would be. Heavy volume, 80, 90, 95 catches in the slot would be how he gets there. I'm not sure Tennessee and that offense will throw enough for him to ever be that type of guy. And then I rounded out with some guys who underperformed last year. Jalen Tolbert at 32, David Bell at 33, and then some day 3 guys from this year. Puka Nacua at 34, Kayshon Boutte at 35, Trey Tucker at 36, A.T. Perry at 37, and then I wanted to get him on the list just to talk about him because there's been a little bit of buzz in camp. At 38, Justin Ross was undrafted free agent last year for the Chiefs. Wanted to at least mention him because he was a guy that in college I was really intrigued with. I was excited when he signed with the Chiefs as an undrafted free agent. We'll see if he can work his way back there. So I wanted to kind of sneak him on there. If we round out tonight with the tight ends, top 4, all this year, right? Dalton Kincaid at number 1, Sam Laporte at number 2, Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave at number 4. All of those guys, I've been on record as saying all of those guys clearly over last year's top guys. At number 5, I have Greg Dulcich. Number 6, Trey McBride. Number 7, Chico Okonkwo. So after the top 4 guys are made up of 2023 rookies, I do have Dulcich, McBride, and Okonkwo. Honestly, I think you can rank Dulcich, McBride, and Okonkwo in any order you want. We'll see how that plays it out. But for me, all of those guys would be after, easily after Kincaid, Laporte, and Mayer. And I'm a big Musgrave fan, so I would much prefer Luke Musgrave over Dulcich, McBride, or Okonkwo. Luke Schoonmaker is number 8. I just think he's going to get every opportunity to be the next Dalton Schultz there. Isaiah Likely, while I love the talent, obviously playing behind Mark Andrews, upgraded wide receiver corps, but I'll just bet on the talent there. He's at number 9. Same thing with number 10, Darnell Washington, right? Fell a little bit due to injury, playing behind Pat Freiermuth, but I love the player. He's at number 10. Tucker Kraft, obviously the second tight end Green Bay drafted, but it was only 1 round later. He's at number 11, Brenton Strange 12, and then rounded out with a couple guys from last year. 13 is Cade Otton, who's going to get an opportunity to start in Tampa Bay. 14 is Jelani Woods. We'll see if he gets an opportunity to start for the Colts. Daniel Bellinger obviously lost his starting job to Darren Waller, but I do think, he's going to still play a lot. I just don't think he's going to be a path for fantasy viability. Jake Ferguson, just in case Luke Shoemaker doesn't take the job right out of the gate. Jake Ferguson could be a guy that has some sneaky value. And then to round out the top 20, then some day 3 guys from this past class. Cameron Latou snuck in late round 3, but then Will Mallory, 18, Josh Wiley, 19, and Elijah Higgins, the wide receiver convert, at number 20. So there it is, guys. My blended 2022 versus 2023 Dynasty Rookie Rankings. I do think it's a fun exercise because I think if you still have drafts left or you're just still looking to make some trades and maybe you drafted some of these rookies, I do think it is interesting to kind of balance them and judge them versus last year's rookie class. Because there's guys like Wan'Dale Robinson or Sky Moore that people might be disappointed in, that maybe you get to that, like I said, the cliff has fallen off. It's pick 31. You're in the 3rd round. That still has some cachet as a 3rd round pick. But if somebody wants to take Zach Evans or Dwayne McBride or Chase Brown, or Kayshon Boutte ridiculously, or somebody like that, if somebody wants to take those guys or Michael Wilson or Charlie Jones or Tyler Scott over Wan'Dale Robinson, over Sky Moore, make that trade. If somebody wants, Quentin Johnston over Christian Watson or George Pickens, I make that trade. So that's how I kind of use this. I think it's an interesting scenario. Like same thing even with the tight ends, right? Like, maybe you're somewhere where, you want a tight end and the top 4 are off the board, but maybe you can give a pick, and go get Chig Okonkwo or Trey McBride or Greg Dulcich from last year before you have to start going to the next wave of this class of the Luke Schoonmakers, the Tucker Krafts, Darnell Washingtons. See if you can get the guys from last year who underperformed. So I think there's a lot of ways you can mix and match this. So I kind of do like evaluating the most recent 2 rookie classes just to kind of, for a dynasty perspective, I think it's interesting. I do hope to do a show soon where I kind of talk through my overall positional dynasty rankings. And the same thing, I'll really emphasize where these rookies sit in my big picture rankings, who's around them, my thought process of how I did these rankings. So I will do some podcasts, maybe talking about my dynasty overall positional rankings as well, to kind of talk about how some of these guys fit in. So there it is, guys. Again, if you're enjoying this content, if you want to see these rankings in real time when I make updates to them, you need the premium notebooks. The best way to get to the website is s2sfootball.com. Check out the premium content tab, and for $9.99, you get access to all of our 2023 premium notebooks. The new ones will not launch until about Labor Day weekend. The rankings notebook has all our different rankings. It has our Dynasty Rookie rankings. It has our Dynasty Rookie tiers. It has our Dynasty Rookie IDP rankings. It now has our blended 2022 versus 2023 Dynasty Rookie rankings. It has my positional overall Dynasty rankings. I am within 24 to 48 hours, I should have Devy rankings fully updated and back in the rankings notebook as well. And then you get the scouting notebook, which has 100 detailed player profiles on 2023 rookies. And then the draft projections notebook, while the draft is come and gone, trying to project how the draft would go, it does have almost 400 players in there, a snapshot of who the player is, how he wins, developmental or areas or concern, their measurements and all that stuff. So it's also a great resource to get a snapshot of who all these players are, guys who are UDFAs, 7th round guys, 6th round guys, a quick snapshot of who they are and how they might be used at the next level. You get it all for $9.99. Best way to support the show and help us to continue to do what we do here. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us. And we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.